I will set that button and 3. Okay. I'll practice this one on you. Now, mind you, it is one chop out of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. Now, all the while this is going on, look at me here. As a matter of fact, I cannot play with the watch on. I can't play with the ring on. You know, it makes extra weight. I can't. It absolutely causes trouble. I notice a couple of you kids have had big rings, and I think it's better not. I really do. Now, you're free. Okay, here we go. Chop, 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 chop. I have not played this piece in at least, I'd say, 4 months. Chop, 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 chop. Now you start opening. Chop, 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 chop. To go twice that fast if I wanted to. But I started, so I'll stick to it. Fix up the choir for what you're going to need later. First of 3 trios, D minor. Get ready to break the pedal. Pedal mixer off. Second trio, A minor. Notice how I get off when there's a help note. Now do a little. Uh-oh. Well, the pedal. Go to the grate and get it fixed for what you want to come. I do not want that. Third trill, G minor. Notice how each one has been a different tonality. Now close everything and begin to pile it on. There's the full swell with the box closed. Here's the full choir with the box closed. Add the mixture of the grade. At the end of this help note, add the 32. I've now got to get ready because I'm passing a point of no return right there. There's nothing I can do now except open boxes. All right, here we go. Start. There's the first. Here comes the second. Miss Turek, I'm told, is a little bit on the pure side, and by that I imagine that she simply prefers to approach from a very traditional standpoint. She has a lot of verve, she's got a lot of technique, a lot of rhythm, and a lot of flair, but she's always dignified. We spent a day being photographed together out there, and it was great fun, but she's always dignified, and I'm afraid that the dignity may get in the way of the last thing of the music. How many of you have ever heard Rosalind Turek play? Did you hear her Goldberg variations by chance? She really is wonderful. She has worked a great deal, and she's very much liked in England. Her being always traditional. I don't mean traditional. Being always dignified goes, you know, the British like it. It's funny about the British. If you're Danny Kaye and you absolutely knock over the traces, they eat Danny Kaye alive in England, and yet they also love Turek, who's quite dignified at all times. They're kind of like, well, New England's something like that, I must say. In Boston, you can have one of the wildest successes of your career, and they also think that they're very traditional. So, have you not seen the announcements? Did you all get them? Most of you got them. I think I have some done.
I'd just like to ask a technical question about that.
Gladly.
In the recording of that, at the end, the spot where you open the swell, you brought on the solo reed.
Yes.
How did you do that?
I said what I was doing, but I guess I was playing so loud you couldn't hear me. You bring on every bit of the power of the enclosed divisions. And at the spot that you start down that scale, you have spilled about half of the swell by there, but then you spill the rest. Now, mind you, when I go to a place that has a great big whopping one out in the open, or better still, I prefer 16, 8, and 4 out in the open, then you have to know very much what you're doing, because then there have to be, that you have to step on at blocks. You can't, you see, if you all were to get my theory of playing the organ, as opposed to that of any of the Volca or any of those people. It is that I do this at any time that I want to. And of course it takes a lot of work. Where they go P, F, double F. They just step on it. Of course, it's not really musical and it's not really artistic, but it is easy. It's much easier. However, if I've got a big battery of reeds hanging out in the open air, what I would do, I would have to have, I'll give you my secret. There were 8 under the grate at Riverside. When those chorus reeds of 16, 8, and 4 that are out in the open come on, I had, out of the 8 pistons, full grate on grate piston 6 without 16s, and wait a minute, there were 8. There were 10 under the grate. The last 2, before the last 2, were full organ without 16 and with 16. In other words, there were 10 pistons under the grate and 7 and 8. 7 was full grate without 16s. The next piston was full without 16 plus what was upstairs without 16. In other words, I had 2 places where I had full organ without 16. One with this, one without it. 2 places where I had 16s, one with this and one without it. So when I get at a spot where I'm going great blazes, like, let's see, where I'm going, mind you, it was right here. So at any moment, wait a minute. I remember that is I could reach down at any moment and get absolutely anything that I wanted, according to what I had preset upstairs first. They were right up in the center, you see.
Right.
I don't remember that exact condition. Listen, you talk about conditions. I played in the First Congregational Church of Los Angeles about 5 Sundays ago on one of the most impossible situations ever handed to any human being. There are 12 divisions of that organ and nothing to control it. When you sit at the chancel, you have 135 stops hanging on the back wall that have no crescendo pedal to operate it. When you sit at the console in the gallery, you have a Skinner organ of 85 stops at the altar and no crescendo pedal to operate it. There was no grate to pedal with either the thumb or the right foot. If you wanted grates to pedal, and there was one for the front organ and one for the, you had to bloody well go up there about 3 octaves and knock it on by hand. And at the end of the first rehearsal, I almost said, you can take your organ and you can do anything with it that you want to. And then I thought, well, I think I'll just show them. So I practiced all night for 5 nights. Imagine, one concert. We were there, my mom lives there. And I had planned to spend some time with her, so I said, honey, we'll see you by day and we'll see that thing by night. So I stayed there until 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 nights straight in a row, and before I walked out to play that concert, I just almost had to take a drink. I don't drink, and I don't approve of it, but if I had been a drinking person, I think I would have. Did you ever hear the marvelous story of Bill Tilden? Bill Tilden was in a tennis match in England on a cold day, and there was a strong wind. Everybody was freezing to death. They were all wrapped up in overcoats, and he was losing. Don't ever forget this story as long as you live. He was losing. It was just strategically close enough to the end of this match where there was still a chance for him. And the story I read with my own 2 eyes has it that there was a bucket of water, a great big pail, a big bucket like that over at the side, and all at once he looked over there, he walked over, took that bucket and dumped it right on top of his head like this, and he was drenched and went back out onto that tennis thing and won the match. Now that's exactly what I did before I walked into that church. I said, we'll see. I knew that there were people who had come from all over the West Coast to hear what the organ could do, because it was just put in there over the dead body of about 16 people. We all tried. No kidding. Everybody begged the old fool that bought it not to buy a Schlicker organ. He is an 80-year-old man. He is a Beverly Hills banker, and he's got millions at the tips of his fingers all the time. And he thought that Mr. Schlicker was a wonderful man. And I said, are you buying a man or are you buying an organ? Isn't it incredible? So they have been properly cheated. It's the largest fraud this side of heaven. It is a terror. It is a horror. But I made that cockeyed B-I-T-C-H, I hope my mother's not listening, go through everything that I decided to make it go through. And at the end of that concert, I was just about numb. But it did it. And guess who was seated in the third pew with my mom? Harold Lloyd. We introduced him to the audience. He's a wonderful man.
He's head of the Rotary International, and he came up afterwards and just went like this. He was so cute. He had an accident when he was hanging from the hands of that darn clock in that one film. What was that thing called? I can't remember. There was one picture he made where he hung from the hands of a clock on a 40-story building, and he actually did a lot of those things himself. And he lost, I think it's these two, of his right hand. And when he shakes hands, he still shakes, you know. So even though there's a lot, doctor's degree could be written on that story. That Schlicker organ hasn't wind enough to blow it. There are no couplers anyhow. And while I was practicing, David said he went into the bellows department of the Bach organ, and the bellows was absolutely flat before I'd ever even gotten up to the swell reeds. And when you play quickly, it doesn't play in time. There were about 8 32-foot called principals on the on the facade that probably cost about $10,000 for those 8 pipes. And the way they speak, they're called 32-foot, and they first give the pitch. They speak a 16-foot pitch after you have held them. In the first place, they won't even start to speak until after you've held them about a second. They go. Imagine, honey.
What does a company like that have to say to stand back with their product?
The fact is that if you were selling a roof to the First Congregational Church of Los Angeles, there are so many people that know about roofs that you couldn't get away with this tragedy. Nobody really knows about organs. And Clarence Mader, who's the leading man in that area for I don't know how many years, has suddenly gone insane. Absolutely. There's such a thing as having an ensemble. There's such a thing as having clarity. But this organ is a total fake.
They must have to back this up somehow. It's their instrument. And
when you tell them, well, when we made up our minds before we ever went in the place, I said to David, if any person addresses you, you say, we have nothing to say. And they asked me in dozens, and every one of them, I said, I have absolutely no comment. And you know what that does. That freezes the pond much thicker than anything else you could do. If I said, whoo, and so forth, and start enumerating all the things that are terrible, I said, I have positively nothing to say. And they'll be stuck with that thing for the next 60 years because it has cost them. Imagine what that organ must have cost. There are over 12 divisions of it, and it's all the same thing.
It's over 200 rings. It's the largest.
Yes, 235 rings.
Is that the one on the inside of the excerpt bulletin?
Yeah, they
The
say,
convention bulletin?
right, that's the one, and they said,
Yes.
they say the Ernest M. Skinner reads, and I guess they incorporated it.
He ruined most of the Skinner stops, except those where he was forbidden to touch. There is a solo organ that has a French horn, an English horn, a gamba soloist, and a gorgeous flute. And the people there said, you may not touch this, but the rest you may touch. He put buzz and sizzle onto the flute celeste. He made the Bach Toccata sound like a goat in labor. It should be quiet, you know, and so that you could mix it with a string with a southern super coupler. Why, there aren't any southern super couplers from anything to anything. There are occasional places where you can have. I went around Robin Hood's barn in such a way, of course I made sounds on the thing that they didn't imagine could exist because I took 5 nights of 5 hours apiece. And you practice for 25 hours and you ought to be able to do something. And
what was the big reed like? They brag about Spanish reed.
the big reed is a total fiasco. You cannot hear it. And when you're standing 10 pews behind one certain place in the cross, you hear nothing but the gallery, and when you're standing about 3 pews ahead of it, you hear nothing but the chancel. At the chancel organ, I had to have David out there all the time. I'd say, left hand loud. No, I can't hear it. All I heard was the left hand. He couldn't hear it. We just worked for 5 nights preparing that one concert, and I'm not sure at the end of the day that I'll ever play there again. I don't think I would. They turned people away the night that I played. There was the biggest crowd I had ever. I have a personality that why I turned to my mother and I said, if you and I were here alone, I would leave. And on the way out, you would hear the largest raspberry you've ever heard. And I wasn't going to insult, you know, our whole family was there. We were Congregationalists at one time or another. That church is absolutely the living end. They had as many organists and choir masters who's looking as anything you ever saw. And one time, I remember the choir came down the center aisle. There were 75 singers in the choir, and they came down in less than 1 minute. I would have to have a slanting aisle going down to show you, and I'd have to have at least from here to the street to show you. They loped just like a deer. They went, holy, 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 and in 1 minute, the 70 people were all in the choir loft. It was the most repulsive thing you've ever seen. So that's the whole story. I don't know what, ask him, listen, we were there in the presence of this amazing lady who was able to see spirits and do all kinds of things, and she was having a few things happen in the air around her too, and over the altar and everything else. It's an amazing thing, but all I can tell you is the organ is inconsequential. It is a fake, and it does not have any beauty except in the Skinner stops. And what is in the back of the church doesn't have wind enough to blow it, doesn't have proper couplers to play it, and there are no controls to use what's there, and there are no controls for the artist. So what are you going to do?
Don't, what happens now when you get to a situation like that, you have a programming mind grant that you would read the play, and you get there and you find that you just simply can't do certain things, and you change it? And
Well, Doris, plenty of times I have said to an audience, and you know, you always have to be tactful. You don't say, your organ won't play my piece. You have to look at the audience and say, since I have arrived, I have found that there are certain pieces that will fit the organ better. And I am playing, but you always have to give it to them in the blood sense, otherwise, because an audience doesn't know like that what they're doing. What if it's the matter? You're looking for something to do. You're kidding. Yeah. Well, I played the program that I intended to play because, of course, out of 235 stops, you couldn't. There's nothing that you couldn't play except that you can't get them on or off. You see, that is true. They're all lined up and down here and here. Row, 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 like that, you see.
And no pistons at all.
Well, there are a few, Michael, just a few pistons. There, I think, let's see if I remember correctly, yes. There are 5 generals that operate the front organ, that operate the Skinner of 85 stops. And I think that there are 10 that operate the organ in the back. But you can't, if you put them together, then some kind of a crazy thing happens. And the last 5 for the back organ are with the left foot on the 3rd row up, where you cannot see in any position you're playing unless you go like this. And of course you can see how often you can go like this in the midst of some furioso. And you know what the toe studs are? A piece of wood that long and that wide that is a little lighter shade than the wood they're attached to, and you go like this and hold. The whole thing. I can tell you the story of Schlicker in 2 sentences. He was a small man who built a loud cutting organ for the Lutheran service and made it of 2 manuals, and the Lutherans liked it because they could hear it and they could stand up and sing their chorales. How he must have a personality that could charm the devil out of hell.
I did a series on various, like McManus and Schlicker, and they both started out building organs out of tin cans. Really,
Well, do you know what? I will tell you what the 32-foot, I didn't think I would go this low, but I will tell you exactly what the 32-foot bombard in that organ in LA sounds like. It sounds like a snake making water in a tin can. It sounds just exactly like a snake urinating in a tin can.